When providing temporary service to a fire pump during construction, it's crucial to adhere to the same guidelines as a permanent installation. This is according to the National Fire Protection Association 20, which covers the installation of stationary fire pumps for fire protection, and the National Fire Protection Association 70, otherwise known as the National Electrical Code. Generally, it is not permitted to make a direct connection from the utility company ahead of the main disconnect of the temporary power panel to the fire pump controller. This is because of safety concerns. The fire pump should be electrically isolated from the utility company's grid for maintenance and in case of emergencies. The National Electrical Code, or National Fire Protection Association 70, requires that the fire pump have its own dedicated circuit and disconnect. The fire pump needs to be electrically isolated for periodic testing and maintenance procedures. To ensure proper installation of temporary service to the fire pump, the following steps should be taken. 1. Install a temporary power panel with a dedicated circuit specifically for the fire pump. 2. Run a dedicated feeder from the temporary power panel to a transfer switch located in the fire pump room. 3. Connect the fire pump to the transfer switch. 4. Install a lockable disconnect switch between the fire pump and the transfer switch. 5. Ensure that the temporary service is properly sized and protected according to both the National Fire Protection Association 20 and the National Fire Protection Association 70, which is the National Electrical Code. The temporary service must be inspected and approved by the local authority having jurisdiction, which is abbreviated as HA, before being put into service. Now let's dive deeper into these aspects, exploring the reasoning and technical details behind each requirement. When setting up a temporary electrical service for a fire pump on a construction site, it's important to understand why these guidelines are in place. A fire pump is a critical piece of life safety equipment designed to provide water flow and pressure to fire protection systems during a fire. Its reliability is paramount, and any compromise in its power supply can have severe consequences. The reason you can't simply tap into the utility company's power ahead of the main disconnect stems from several fundamental safety and code-related principles. Firstly, electrical isolation is key. In emergency situations, such as an electrical fault or during maintenance, the fire pump needs to be completely isolated from the utility grid. This isolation ensures that any issues on the grid don't affect the fire pump's operation and vice versa. If the fire pump were directly connected without a dedicated disconnect, any electrical problem on the utility side could potentially disable the pump, rendering it useless when it's needed most. Secondly, a National Electrical Code mandates a dedicated circuit for fire pumps. This requirement isn't arbitrary, it's based on the need for a reliable and protected power supply. A dedicated circuit means that the fire pump has its own circuit breaker and wiring that are not shared with any other equipment. This reduces the risk of overloading the circuit and ensures that the fire pump always has sufficient power. The dedicated disconnect switch further enhances safety by allowing the fire pump to be easily isolated for maintenance or testing. Thirdly, the need for periodic testing and maintenance is a critical consideration. Fire pumps must be regularly tested to ensure they are in proper working order. During these tests, it's often necessary to isolate the pump from the electrical supply to perform various checks and adjustments safely. A direct connection to the utility would make this isolation difficult and potentially dangerous. Now, let's break down the recommended steps for proper temporary service installation. The first step involves installing a temporary power panel with a dedicated circuit for the fire pump. This panel should be sized appropriately to handle the pump's electrical load, and it should be equipped with overcurrent protection devices such as circuit breakers or fuses to protect the circuit from overloads and short circuits. The wiring from the temporary power panel to the fire pump must be sized according to the National Electrical Code guidelines, taking into account the pump's voltage, amperage, and distance from the panel. The second step involves running a dedicated feeder from the temporary power panel to a transfer switch in the fire pump room. The feeder is the set of wires that carries electrical power from the panel to the transfer switch. It should be installed in a conduit or other approved raceway to protect it from physical damage. The transfer switch is a critical component that allows the fire pump to be switched between the normal power source and an alternate power source, such as a generator, in the event of a power outage. The third step involves connecting the fire pump to the transfer switch. This connection should be made by a qualified electrician, and it should comply with all applicable codes and standards. The wiring should be properly terminated and secured to prevent loose connections, which can cause electrical problems. The fourth step involves installing a lockable disconnect switch between the fire pump and the transfer switch. This disconnect switch provides a means of isolating the fire pump for maintenance or testing. It should be lockable in the open position to prevent accidental energization while work is being performed on the pump. The fifth step is ensuring that the temporary service is properly sized and protected. This includes verifying that the wiring, circuit breakers, and disconnect switches are all rated for the fire pump's electrical load. It also includes ensuring that the system is properly grounded to prevent electrical shock hazards. Finally, the temporary service must be inspected and approved by the local authority having jurisdiction before it is put into service. The authority having jurisdiction is the local government agency responsible for enforcing building and electrical codes. The inspector will review the installation to ensure that it complies with all applicable codes and standards, and they will issue an approval before the system can be energized. When sizing the temporary power panel and associated components, several factors must be considered. The first is the fire pump's motor horsepower rating. This rating indicates the amount of mechanical power the motor can produce, and it is directly related to the electrical power it will draw. The higher the horsepower rating, the more electrical power the pump will require. The second factor is the pump's voltage and amperage requirement. These values are typically listed on the motor's nameplate, and they indicate the voltage and current the motor needs to operate properly. It's important to use the correct voltage and amperage when sizing the electrical components to ensure that the pump operates efficiently and reliably. The third factor is the distance from the temporary power panel to the fire pump. The longer the distance, the larger the wire size will need to be to minimize voltage drop. Voltage drop occurs when the voltage at the fire pump is lower than the voltage at the power panel due to the resistance of the wires. Excessive voltage drop can cause the pump to operate inefficiently and can even damage the motor. To minimize voltage drop, it's important to use the correct wire size and to keep the distance between the power panel and the pump as short as possible. In addition to sizing the electrical components correctly, it's also important to protect them from physical damage. The wiring should be installed in a conduit or other approved raceway to protect it from impacts, abrasion, and moisture. The circuit breakers and disconnect switches should be enclosed in a weatherproof enclosure to protect them from the elements. Grounding is another critical aspect of temporary fire pump service. Grounding provides a path for fault current to flow back to the source in the event of an electrical fault. This helps to protect people from electrical shock hazards and to prevent damage to equipment. The grounding system should be installed in accordance with the National Electrical Code guidelines, and it should be properly tested to ensure that it is effective. The temporary power panel should be grounded to a grounding electrode, such as a ground rod or a metallic water pipe. The grounding electrode should be located as close as possible to the power panel, and it should be connected to the panel with a grounding conductor. The fire pump motor should also be grounded to the grounding electrode. This can be done by connecting a grounding conductor from the motor frame to the grounding electrode. All metallic components of the electrical system, such as conduits, enclosures, and junction boxes, should be bonded together to create a continuous grounding path. Bonding ensures that all metallic components are at the same electrical potential, which reduces the risk of electrical shock hazards. The grounding system should be tested periodically to ensure that it is still effective. This can be done by using a ground resistance tester to measure the resistance between the grounding electrode and the earth. The resistance should be low enough to allow fault current to flow back to the source quickly and safely. The temporary power panel should also have ground fault protection. This protection is designed to detect small amounts of current leakage to ground, which can indicate an insulation fault. When ground fault protection detects a fault, it will trip the circuit breaker, de-energizing the circuit and preventing electrical shock hazards. Ground fault protection is typically required for temporary power panels used on construction sites. In summary, providing temporary service to a fire pump during construction requires careful planning and execution. It's important to follow the guidelines outlined in the National Fire Protection Association 20 in the National Electrical Code, and to work with a qualified electrician to ensure that the system is installed safely and correctly. By following these guidelines, you can help to ensure that the fire pump will operate reliably when it's needed most, protecting lives and property from fire. Remember that the authority having jurisdiction plays a crucial role in the approval process. Before energizing the temporary fire pump service, obtain the necessary permits and schedule an inspection. The authority having jurisdiction inspector will verify that the installation complies with all applicable codes and standards, ensuring that it is safe and reliable. Throughout the construction process, maintain clear communication with the general contractor and other stakeholders. This communication will help to ensure that everyone is aware of the temporary fire pump service and that it is properly maintained. Regular inspections and maintenance are essential to ensure the continued reliability of the temporary fire pump service. Check the wiring, circuit breakers, and disconnect switches regularly to ensure that they are in good working order. Also, inspect the grounding system to ensure that it is still effective. The transfer switch should also be tested periodically to ensure that it is functioning properly. This test will verify that the switch can automatically transfer the fire pump to the alternate power source in the event of a power outage. If any problems are found during the inspections, they should be repaired promptly. Addressing issues quickly will help to prevent more serious problems from developing and will ensure that the fire pump remains operational. Document all inspections, maintenance, and repairs performed on the temporary fire pump service. This documentation will provide a record of the system's history and will be helpful for future maintenance and troubleshooting. When the construction project is complete, the temporary fire pump service should be removed. This removal should be done by a qualified electrician, and it should be done in accordance with all applicable codes and standards. The wiring, circuit breakers, and disconnect switches should be removed, and the grounding system should be disconnected. The area where the temporary fire pump service was located should be restored to its original condition. By following these steps, you can ensure that the temporary fire pump service is removed safely and properly. Remember that temporary fire pump service is a critical component of fire protection during construction. It's important to follow the guidelines outlined in the National Fire Protection Association 20 and the National Electrical Code, and to work with qualified professionals to ensure that the system is installed, maintained, and removed safely and correctly. Attention to detail, adherence to codes, and regular maintenance are key to ensuring the reliability and effectiveness of temporary fire pump service. The goal is always to provide a reliable and safe fire protection system throughout the construction phase, protecting lives and property from the devastating effects of fire. When dealing with electrical systems, especially those related to life safety equipment like fire pumps, it's always best to consult with experienced and licensed professionals. Their expertise can help to ensure that the installation complies with all applicable codes and standards, and that the system is safe and reliable. Working with professionals can also help to identify potential problems early on, preventing costly repairs and ensuring that the fire pump operates effectively when needed. The importance of fire pumps during construction cannot be overstated. These pumps provide a crucial line of defense against fire, protecting workers, buildings, and equipment. By understanding the requirements for temporary fire pump service and by following best practices for installation, maintenance, and removal, you can help to ensure that the fire protection system is always ready to respond to an emergency. This dedication to safety and reliability can make a significant difference in the outcome of a fire, potentially saving lives and preventing significant property damage. The requirements outlined in the National Fire Protection Association 20 and the National Electrical Code are not just recommendations, they are mandatory standards that must be followed to ensure the safety and reliability of fire protection systems. Failure to comply with these standards can result in serious consequences, including fines, project delays, and potential liability in the event of a fire. Therefore, it's essential to take these requirements seriously and to make sure that all aspects of the temporary fire pump service comply with the applicable codes and standards. Ongoing training and education are also important for anyone involved in the installation, maintenance, or removal of temporary fire pump service. Staying up to date on the latest codes, standards, and best practices will help to ensure that the system is always safe and reliable. Training can also help to improve the skills and knowledge of electrical workers, enabling them to perform their jobs more effectively and efficiently. In addition to the technical aspects of temporary fire pump service, it's also important to consider the administrative aspects. This includes obtaining the necessary permits, scheduling inspections, and maintaining proper documentation. These administrative tasks are essential for ensuring that the project complies with all applicable regulations and that the system is properly tracked and maintained. Proper planning and coordination are also critical for the success of temporary fire pump service. This includes coordinating with the general contractor, the electrical contractor, the fire protection contractor, and the authority having jurisdiction to ensure that everyone is on the same page and that the project proceeds smoothly. Effective communication is also essential for resolving any issues that may arise during the project. By working together and communicating effectively, all parties can help to ensure that the temporary fire pump service is installed, maintained, and removed safely and correctly. The complexity of temporary fire pump service requires a systematic approach. Firstly, conduct a thorough site assessment to determine the specific requirements of the project. Secondly, develop a detailed plan that outlines the scope of work, the materials needed, and the schedule for installation, maintenance, and removal. Thirdly, implement the plan diligently, following all applicable codes, standards, and best practices. Fourthly, monitor the system regularly to ensure that it is functioning properly and that any issues are addressed promptly. Fifthly, document all aspects of the project, including the site assessment, the plan, the installation, the maintenance, the monitoring, and the removal. This systematic approach will help to ensure that the temporary fire pump service is a success and that it provides a reliable and safe fire protection system throughout the construction phase. Remember that temporary fire pump service is not a one-size-fits-all solution. The specific requirements of each project will vary depending on the size and type of construction, the location of the project, and the applicable codes and standards. Therefore, it's important to tailor the temporary fire pump service to the specific needs of the project. This customization will help to ensure that the system is effective, efficient, and cost-effective. The information provided in this overview is intended to provide a general understanding of temporary fire pump service. It's not a substitute for professional advice. Always consult with qualified professionals before making any decisions about temporary fire pump service. Their expertise can help to ensure that the project is successful and that the fire protection system is safe and reliable. Consider the environmental conditions at the construction site. Extreme temperatures, humidity, and exposure to dust and debris can impact the performance and lifespan of electrical equipment. Select components that are rated for the specific environmental conditions and take measures to protect the equipment from the elements. Weatherproof enclosures and regular cleaning can help to prevent damage and ensure that the equipment operates reliably. When selecting a transfer switch, choose a model that is specifically designed for fire pump applications. These switches are typically equipped with features such as automatic transfer capabilities, manual override mechanisms, and diagnostic indicators. The transfer switch should be sized appropriately for the fire pump's electrical load and should comply with all applicable codes and standards. The disconnect switch should be readily accessible and clearly labeled. It should be located in a safe and convenient location away from potential hazards. The switch should be lockable in the open position to prevent accidental energization during maintenance or testing. Regular inspection should include a visual examination of the wiring, circuit breakers, disconnect switches, and grounding system. Look for signs of damage such as frayed wires, cracked insulation, or corroded terminals. Use a multimeter to check the voltage and current at various points in the system to ensure that they are within acceptable limits. Test the operation of the transfer switch to verify that it can automatically transfer the fire pump to the alternate power source in the event of a power outage. Use a ground resistance tester to measure the resistance between the grounding electrode and the earth. The resistance should be low enough to allow fault current to flow back to the source quickly and safely. Keep a detailed log of all inspections, maintenance, and repairs performed on the temporary fire pump service. This log should include the date, time, and nature of the work performed, as well as the name of the person who performed the work. The log can be used to track the system's performance over time and to identify any potential problems. Consider the use of remote monitoring systems to track the performance of the temporary fire pump service. These systems can provide real-time data on the system's voltage, current, and other parameters. They can also send alerts if any problems are detected. Remote monitoring systems can help to improve the reliability and efficiency of the temporary fire pump service. Develop a comprehensive emergency response plan that outlines the steps to be taken in the event of a fire or other emergency. This plan should include procedures for notifying the fire department, evacuating the building, and operating the fire protection system. All workers should be trained on the emergency response plan and should know their roles and responsibilities. Conduct regular fire drills to practice the emergency response plan and to ensure that all workers are familiar with the procedures. These drills can help to identify any weaknesses in the plan and to improve the overall preparedness of the construction site. Post emergency contact information in a conspicuous location such as near the temporary power panel or in the fire pump room. This information should include the phone numbers for the fire department, the police department, and the local emergency management agency. Ensure that all workers have access to appropriate personal protective equipment, such as hard hats, safety glasses, and gloves. This equipment can help to protect workers from injuries in the event of a fire or other emergency. Maintain a well-stocked first aid kit on the construction site. This kit should include supplies for treating minor injuries, such as cuts, burns, and sprains. All workers should be trained on how to use the first aid kit. Regularly review and update the temporary fire pump service plan to ensure that it is still relevant and effective. This review should take into account any changes in the construction project, the applicable codes and standards, or the environmental conditions at the construction site. The temporary fire pump service plan should be a living document that is constantly evolving to meet the changing needs of the project.